What's up, guys? Welcome to the latest episode of Out of the Shadows. So in my last episode, I tried to go back to form, so to speak. I tried to have notes and see how it would work if I actually had something written down as opposed to just kind of winging it. And I really didn't like how it came out. It seemed way too rehearsed to me, so I'm trying to refine that process. In this one, I don't have any notes. I'm very much just going off of my thoughts alone, and I don't even have a title right now, so you'll see the title in the description, obviously. But that being said, I want to just go over some general stuff. Like I said, this is going to be very chill, very typical, just everyday things. Now, for the most part, any of us who are putting out content in terms of personal growth, self-help, things like that, especially for mental health purposes, there's a whole lot of kind of how-to content out there. You know, here's the steps, or here's this process that's going to help you reduce your anxiety or combat your depression. Obviously, I think everything's going to have a piece of that in there, but I don't think that formal lists are always helpful. Some of it you need to know the day-to-day. In my experiences, what have I found helps? What are just normal things I do every day without really having to think about them at this point? So, some very basic things. I've talked about this in some of my Instagram videos. Bill Burr, who's a tremendous comedian, check him out if you haven't. He talked about when he was still coming up and struggling and trying to make it as a comic, that one of the things he would do if he had a negative thought in his head, like, you know, who are you to try this? You need to get a 9-to-5 job. You need to stop all this nonsense and, you know, get your life together, be a grown-up. And to combat that negative voice inside, he immediately would just say, fuck that, in his head. It's so simple, but it can be so effective. I find myself in situations where, like anyone else, I get discouraged. I'm just like, oh my God, you know, I have so few views. I don't have that many followers. Am I really making content that's worthwhile? What's the point? You got so many other things to do. Be realistic. And if I just have that voice where I start thinking like that, I'm like, man, like, what are you doing? You can't swing this. And immediately I just think, fuck that. It's very effective, very simple, but works very well. There are a lot of little things. You know, I preach a lot about Bruce Lee, as you can see right here. Big Bruce Lee fan. A lot of his ideas have inspired me greatly. One of the things I talk about a lot is absorb what's useful, discard what is useless, and add what is essentially your own. Now, the way that I live by that, anything that I watch or read in terms of personal growth material or psychology or whatever, I try and take little things and use them. Now, that sounds very self-evident, like, well, of course, isn't that how you learn? Duh. But it can be something very little. There's a woman out there, Mel Robbins, big personal growth advocate, great content on Instagram. I very much recommend following her, looking into her. She has something called the 5-second rule. So in a situation where, say, you have to get up early to work out, the alarm goes off. Your first instinct is hit snooze, I'm going to wait at least 15 minutes. Or worse, let's reset the alarm, we're not doing this today. So her 5-second rule is to count backwards from 5, and once you get to 1, to get up. So in your head, very simple, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, get up. I use this with very simple things. If it's a lazy day where, all right, I need to go take a shower, get ready, run some errands. You don't feel like doing it. It's a Sunday, whatever. I'll sit there and I'll be like, all right, let's do this. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'll get up and do it. Now, I've gotten so much into the habit of this that for me, usually by the time I get to 3, I'm up and doing it. Because what I've reasoned out for so long is it's very easy, especially if you struggle with issues of depression, to where you get lazy and you're like, I don't want to do this. I don't feel like doing it. Could be something very simple, and you sit there and you procrastinate and you put it off and you put it off, and next thing you know, it's been a half hour, then it's been an hour, then it's been 2 hours, and you're like, yeah, I'll do it tomorrow. So what I started to think about is, how much worse is it when I put those things off? How much worse is it for me to sit here and be like, I should do it, maybe I'll do it now, I'll wait a little bit. And the more I realize that it's so much better to just get up as soon as, or not long after I have the thought, as opposed to sitting there and having this mental dialogue of, oh, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. I'm very good now at, if I have something to do, like, you know, take a shower, get up, run errands, whatever, I'm very good at being like, all right, I need to do that. And the most I'll give myself is like, all right, you got 5-10 minutes to sit here, finish your coffee, whatever, and then just go. And it's become very natural, I guess you could say, for me to do that. As opposed to sitting there and thinking like, when do I want to do this? Or should I do this? Or should I wait? I don't allow that debate to even begin. As soon as I'm like, should I do it? I just go. For example, today, very simple thing. I needed to go get a haircut. This is my day off. One of my days off, rather. The other day is Sunday. Today's Monday. Haircut place ain't open on Sunday, so I have to go today. So I was like, all right. When I woke up, had my coffee, I'm like, all right, you're going to finish your coffee. You're going to have something to eat. You're going to go. If I sat there and waited and was like, well, what time should I go? Maybe I can go around like 2, or maybe I can go by this time. Would have took forever, wouldn't have got it done. So I got it in my head, as soon as you finish eating, get ready, get out. Simple. Now, again, I know from experience, it's very easy for me to sit here and say this, and if you're experiencing clinical depression or a severe depression, however you'd like to word it, it's much more difficult to just be like, oh, well, I'm just going to do it. That's not easy when you're in that position. Obviously, I'm not in a severely depressed state right now. It's a little simpler for me. This didn't happen all at once. So it's like anything else. I'm a big believer in small steps, do things gradually. If you're at a point where you're so depressed that it's hard to do anything, it's hard to get out of bed, say, start super small. When I should say one of my major depressions, getting out of bed was difficult, and if I got out of bed, essentially I was moving from the bed to the couch to watch TV, laying down again. So the first goal I had, and it's a very simple, small goal, was, all right, I'm going to let myself lay down for 3 hours, and after that, I'm going to sit up. And I'm sitting up the rest of the day until I go to bed. Small goal seems very insignificant, but genuinely speaking, if you were to reverse engineer how I got good at being able to simply go and do what I need to do instead of sitting there and having this internal debate with myself, that's where it started. When I was in this terribly depressed state, or I've been in those terribly depressed states, I had to learn to be like, all right, I don't want to do anything, let's do something small. Then when that becomes simple, it's like, all right, now I can sit up, no problem. Now I need to start getting myself together, thinking about what do I need to do. All right, well, I really need to clean my room, or I really need to clean out my closet and get stuff donated and create room for that. Little things, dishes, whatever, and start somewhere. Something is always better than nothing. If it's something as simple as doing the dishes, and you're like, oh my God, dude, like I've left this for 2-3 days. Tell yourself, you know what, I'm going to do that stack. And a lot of times that will build enough momentum to then get you to do more. So the point of that whole train of thought right there is you have to start somewhere. Don't think if you're severely depressed, like, hey, this guy is sitting there saying that, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, he just goes off and does what he needs to do. Like, I'm super depressed, I can't do that, that's impossible. It's more difficult, but you can get there. You have to start where you're at. Just like if someone's working out and trying to build a physique, you're not going to go in the gym after a year, 2 years, whatever it's been of not working out and be like, you know what, I'm going to start with my bench press with 300 pounds. It's not going to happen. You got to start easy. You got to build up to it. It's just the way it is. And I think we all have a natural tendency. I can't remember who said this, but self-evident but very true. Nobody wants to start at the bottom. Yet that's where we all have to start. So as humans, we have a natural tendency to compare ourselves to everyone else. Oh, well, my YouTube channel only has 50 followers, but friends of mine on YouTube, they have hundreds or thousands. Like, well, why can't I do that? You know what? I can't even do it. I shouldn't even bother. We get into that thought process, and I think it was Theodore Roosevelt maybe who said, "Comparison is the thief of joy." Don't quote me on who said that, but comparison is the thief of joy is the quote. It's very true. We compare ourselves to other people. We get down on ourselves because we're not where they are, but we don't see what it took them to get there. The guy who's running 5 miles a day and has 10% body fat didn't get there in a week. It took time. It took effort. It took, getting into the proper dietary regimen, all those things. And that's what it is with anything. You have to don't compare yourself to others. Compare yourself to yourself. And that sounds very simple, but you have to do your best to focus on, all right, well, I've started putting in this minimal effort, or maybe minimal effort's not the best way to put it. I've started putting in an amount of effort that is more than I was putting in previously. So for me, I generally, try to do at least 2 days of yoga, 2 days of strength training a week. I won't lie, a lot of times I don't get it. I find myself a lot of times it's 1 day yoga, 2 days of yoga, 1 day of strength training, or 1 and 1. And that's not great, obviously. It's not hitting my goal, but it's far better than doing nothing. If I let myself get there and be like, oh my God, dude, you're never hitting your goal. You're screwing up. You might as well just stop. It's going to be completely counterproductive. I always tell myself when I'm doing it, even if I'm like, oh my God, it's the end of the week, what are you going to do, 1 day? I'm like, yeah, you're going to do 1 day, because something is always better than nothing. It's better to slowly chip away at something than to not do it at all. There's some kind of I don't know if it's an art form or what, but Tony Robbins mentioned this in one of his books, where these people will literally, it'll be like a massive boulder, and they'll hit it with a hammer, and it's, one hit, and it's looks like nothing's happening. But eventually, over time, after like the 1,000th time they hit this rock, it breaks. So I tend to think of things that are these big goals that I know are going to take time. In terms of that, I'm like, all right, well, I'm giving this one solid crack of the hammer each day. And I may not see it now, but eventually that's going to result in a benefit. So that is something to keep in mind. Another thing, this is something I picked up from a episode of The Impact Theory. Great show on YouTube. Check it out. Tom Bilyeu is the host. Follow him on Instagram. He had a gentleman on who is a scientist, a brain scientist. There's a more formal term for that, but you know what I'm saying. Neuroscience, whatever. And the guy discussed how they would do these studies where they'd have people doing some kind of physical activity, typically something like running. And they would have monitors hooked up to the brain, and they were able to map out and see when this person was going to give up. Like, all right, this brainwave is showing, now this isn't exactly how it happened, but this is the premise. This brainwave is showing that he's going to give up in like 30 seconds. So they would say to the guy, hey, you know what? Go for another minute. So by pushing past that limit a little bit, that's how they would create bigger and bigger and bigger return on investment, so to speak. Now, one of my most recent videos, I talk about the Wim Hof method, which is a method of breathing. It's good for various things. There's a lot of physiological benefits. I recommend checking out those videos of mine. Also, check out Wim Hof in general. But I do the breathing method every day. It's helped to reduce my anxiety and depression by a number or a percentage that I can't even really express. It's great. Now, the breathing method, you take in 30 very deep breaths, and the 30th breath, the 30th exhalation actually, you hold it. And because you've taken in so much oxygen, you can hold your breath longer than normal. Most people typically, when they first start off, their retention period's anywhere from a minute to, say, a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Now, when I started, I only was able to hold it for about 40 seconds after my first round of breathing. You actually do 4 rounds of that, 4 rounds of deep breathing. Each one has a retention at the end where you're holding your breath. And I was getting frustrated. And I realized part of the issue for me was not so much that I physically needed air, but that psychologically, it's just hardwired into your system. You're like, you should be breathing. So you get scared. And I thought about that guy talking about the study where they would see, all right, well, they're going to give up now. I'm going to tell them go an extra 30 seconds, push the line a little bit. So as soon as I'd feel myself getting scared and like, oh, I'm going to breathe, I would tell myself, count to 10, then you can stop. So I'd push it another 10 seconds when I was like, I think I'm going to break. Or then I'd go 20 seconds. So little things like that, whether it's physical exercise or It could even be a situation where, again, with depression or anxiety or social anxiety specifically, you don't feel like going out. So you go and you're like, you know what, I'm going to hang out with this friend, or I'm going to go get coffee, and I'm going to sit there for a half hour. And it takes a lot out of you. You're anxious. You're dealing with these feelings to kind of acclimate yourself to the situation and be able to get back to kind of a generally normal semblance of whatever you want to call it. You can just endure these things the way you were able to prior to this. So in that situation, if you're used to going, you hang out with your friend an hour a week or whatever it is, you're like, I'm going to socialize for 1 hour a week. That's my starting point, or 30 minutes, whatever it is. Then the way to start to build on that, even if you're still having difficulties, be like, you know what, I've been doing a half hour, let's do 40 minutes. Then when that gets easy, 45, 50. Build slowly. Like I said, I'm a big believer in gradual and small, consistent steps. You are far more likely, in my opinion, to develop a system where you're going to continuously do this than if you're like, all right, well, I need to lose 30 pounds, and I need to eat better, and I need to build muscle, and I need to do all these things. I need to change my diet. And if you have all these massive things and like, I must do this and it has to be an X amount of time, you need to a point where you'd be like, not happening, I quit. Start small. If it's something like that, I'm going to work out once a week, then twice a week. All right, I'm going to change my diet a little bit. Gradual. And then instead of these things becoming these regimens that you have to follow and force yourself, it becomes a way of life. I mean, I meditate just about every day. It has to be a really big situation for me to miss it. It's very rare. And if you would have told me that I'd be doing that even 2 years ago, I'd be like, no. And the reason that I started was because I was like, well, let me give this a shot. And I started with a different form of meditation than I do now. And I would do it I think I started maybe 3 days a week. And then it felt so good that I started doing it maybe 5 days a week. And then I evolved into, I found the Wim Hof method, and I started doing it. By the time I got there, I started doing it every day. And then I would miss, it had to be relatively important, but not as much as now. It's still now it's got to be earth-shattering. And my point being that I developed this because I started small. I didn't try to go in the deep end and say, I'm going to meditate every single day for an hour a day, 7 days a week. I'm never going to miss it. No way. It has to be like this. If I'm too strict, if I apply all these restrictions and these musts, not going to happen. But because I went into it gradually and I saw the benefits and I started to really enjoy it, now it's just what I do. And I think really that's the goal for anyone. It's not a matter of, all right, well, I want to have all these things in place that I should do and I make myself do all the time. You're very hard pressed to maintain that. It's a much better approach, in my opinion, to create things that are, I'm going to start doing X, Y, and Z, and I want to implement these things to just be regular parts of my life. Now, of course, you're not going to necessarily say, well, this is what it's going to be, and that's going to be a part of my life. You have to try different things, see what works for you, start slowly, start to integrate things. And that's what happens. Then, again, it's just what you do. You know, we know people out there, whether you know them personally or you know them online through some kind of content, who are in phenomenal physical shape, or there's people who have a really good mindset, and they nurture that mindset through meditation or yoga or therapy, whatever it is. They have these things that they just do. That's just what they do. These aren't things they wake up every day and go, oh, gotta do that again. No, it's just they just do it because they've started to do it. It just becomes part of who they are. So, all right, this is about as unscripted as it gets, that's for sure. I hope you guys liked the video. Please like, share, and subscribe. As always, follow me on Instagram at OutOfTheShadowsCorvo. Just like my name here, it's all one word. I'll put the link below. And until later, my friends, be well.